Thread by Thread. Chapter 1. Frayed at the Seams. MaryRuth hadn't expected the end of her marriage to begin with kale chips. But there it was. Her soon-to-be ex-husband, crunching smugly on a handful while announcing he was leaving her for someone who runs. As if cardio and abs could replace 12 years of shared life and 2 gloriously messy daughters.
If this story is already tugging at something in you, hit that subscribe button. We share real, raw, and inspiring stories every week, the kind that stay with you long after the video ends. So if you're into heartfelt journeys and gentle breakthroughs, you're in the right place.
I just feel like I need a fresh start, he'd said, eyeing her like she was an outdated model of something once useful. She doesn't come with all the stress. All the stress, meaning the kids. The mortgage. The way MaryRuth had slowly stopped trying to impress him with lacy underwear and had started prioritizing coupons and Pinterest lunchbox ideas instead. That had been 2 weeks ago. Since then, MaryRuth had stopped crying. Mostly, the kids were surviving. Emmy, age 10, had turned to art, and Lila, age 12, had turned to sarcasm. MaryRuth herself had turned to thread. Her sewing machine, dusty from months of neglect, now purred like an old friend every evening once the girls were asleep. It started small. A tiered ruffle skirt for Emmy from an old linen curtain. Then a patchwork dress for Lila, built from thrifted chambray and cotton scraps. When the girls wore them to school, other moms commented. Compliments poured in. Some even asked where she'd bought them. I made them, MaryRuth said the first time, almost embarrassed. The mom had blinked in genuine surprise. Wait, seriously? Like, by hand? By machine, she'd corrected. But yeah. Girl, you could sell those. MaryRuth had laughed it off, but the idea stuck. 2 nights later, in the glow of her kitchen's dim light, she posted a few photos in a local Charleston mom Facebook group. No prices, just a casual, thinking about starting something. Would anyone be interested in custom dresses like these? She went to bed feeling foolish, fully expecting to wake up to silence. Instead, there were 87 comments by morning. Most were kind. A few asked for prices. One woman said, "Please tell me you ship." Another offered to trade organic baby food for a custom piece. But buried among them was one message that felt different. Hey, MaryRuth, I used to work for a design studio in Atlanta. I know this might be random, but would you be open to grabbing coffee? I have some ideas. And also, these are freaking adorable. Sarah McConnell. MaryRuth stared at the message, reread it, then checked the woman's profile. Blonde. Stylish? Maybe late 40s? Her profile photo showed her laughing, holding a glass of wine and a bulldog in a baby sling. Not the kind of woman MaryRuth usually crossed paths with. Still, curiosity overruled nerves. She typed back, "Hi, Sarah. Sure, coffee sounds great. I could use one." The coffee shop was on the corner of King and Spring, a cozy place with gold pendant lights and overpriced croissants. MaryRuth arrived early, nervous enough to order a lavender latte she didn't know how to pronounce. She wore her best thrifted chambray dress and her favorite beaded earrings, even though she'd chipped a nail that morning and had forgotten mascara. Sarah breezed in 5 minutes late, carrying a giant woven tote and an energy that filled the space. "You must be MaryRuth. Oh, honey, you look better than your Instagram." MaryRuth blinked. "Thanks." "I mean that in a good way," Sarah said, laughing. "Your vibe screams creative, cool mom. Love the earrings." They sat. Sarah waved off the menu and ordered a black Americano. "Too many years of design school and divorce court. I need it straight." The word divorce landed heavy between them. MaryRuth found herself blurting, "He left me for a coworker." "She runs." Sarah nodded slowly. "Mine left me for his therapist. We now refer to her as Doctor." Boundaries. They both laughed. It was shockingly easy falling into conversation. Sarah asked about the dresses, about the fabrics, the sewing machine model. She'd clearly done her homework, referencing sewing blogs and eco-fashion trends. "I saw your post," she said, stirring her coffee. "And then I saw your pricing in the comments." MaryRuth flinched. "Too high?" Sarah stared at her. "Too low. Girl, you're charging less than Target. Do you know what your time is worth?" MaryRuth opened her mouth, then closed it. She didn't. Not really. Sarah leaned in. "I used to work in fashion. Real fashion. Big brands. Let me tell you a secret. Those $10 dresses, they cost someone. Maybe not the buyer, but someone." MaryRuth swallowed. "But I thought the whole point was to make it affordable. Moms like me can't drop $80 on a dress. No one's asking you to price for everyone. You're not Walmart. You're an artist." It felt foreign, that word. Artist. Sarah continued. "You're making heirloom pieces. They're sustainable, handmade, beautiful. That's not cheap. That's luxury." "But MaryRuth stopped. She was about to say, "I don't feel like luxury." But that wasn't the point. Sarah pulled out her phone and showed her photos of boutique children's lines, some handmade, some ethically produced, all priced 3 or 4 times what MaryRuth had planned. "If you don't charge what it's worth, people won't value it. And worse, you'll burn out before you begin." They sat in silence for a moment. MaryRuth sipped her now cold lavender latte. Then Sarah smiled. "Want help figuring this out? I've got time, and frankly, I could use a distraction from stalking my ex's new wedding registry." MaryRuth laughed, then nodded. "Yes, please." And just like that, something new began. Not with a business plan, not with a spreadsheet, but with a friend and a spark of something MaryRuth hadn't felt in a while. Possibility. Chapter 2. A Stitch of Hope. The next few days fluttered by in a blur of ideas, Pinterest boards, and coffee cups with Sarah's lipstick prints on the rim. MaryRuth's house, once silent after bedtime, now buzzed with quiet excitement. Fabric swatches draped over chair backs. Post-it notes covered the fridge with scribbles like "tiered muslin, $18 per yard," and "handmade tags, maybe plantable seed paper." It felt like something was finally waking up inside her. Or maybe she was waking up to herself. Still, reality kept tugging at her hem. Every time she penciled out what it would really cost to make one of her dresses, organic fabric, thread, buttons, time, her stomach turned. The numbers didn't lie. If she wanted to pay herself even $15 an hour, and that was laughably low, according to Sarah, her dresses needed to retail for $65 to $95 minimum, which was light years away from the $28 she had quoted in her Facebook post. "Why does this feel so hard?" she asked Sarah as they sat on her back porch one afternoon while the girls painted rocks nearby. Sarah passed her an iced hibiscus tea. "Because you've spent your whole life equating being good with being cheap." MaryRuth blinked. "Oof, call me out." "I'm serious. Somewhere along the way, someone taught you that being frugal was noble, that sacrifice was moral, and that making money, real money, was selfish." "Well, yeah." "But it's not. Making money with integrity is how women change things. How we create beautiful lives and take care of our families without resentment." MaryRuth stared out at her overgrown garden. The weeds were creeping into the tomato beds again. She made a mental note to pull them. Later. "I just don't know who I am if I'm not the mom who finds things at Goodwill for $3 and turns them into magic." "You're still that mom," Sarah said, softer now. "You're just letting yourself be paid for the magic." That night, with Sarah's help, MaryRuth crafted her first real product listing. The dress was one she'd refined over weeks, a soft, flutter-sleeve design with a tie-back waist and a full twirl factor, made from organic double gauze. She named it the Magnolia. They took photos in the golden light with Emmy and Lila giggling in the front yard. MaryRuth edited them in Canva while the girls fought over who got to pick the next dress name. She uploaded everything to a basic Shopify template and paused before entering the price. $95, Sarah said, sipping wine. That's barely a profit. MaryRuth's fingers hovered over the keys. She could hear her mother's voice in the back of her head. Who would pay that? You're not Neiman Marcus, sweetie. She typed it anyway. $95. Then she hit publish. The next morning brought a mix of adrenaline and regret. She refreshed the site obsessively, checking for sales. Nothing. By noon, she was second-guessing everything. By 2 p.m., she had fully convinced herself that Sarah was wrong, that she had ruined her one chance at making this work. And then, at 2:16 p.m., an email pinged. New order. 1 magnolia dress. MaryRuth's hands flew to her mouth. It was a woman named Julia from Savannah. She left a note in the checkout field. I saw your post in the Charleston Moms group. These are beautiful. Please don't undercharge yourself. This will be my daughter's birthday dress. Tears welled in MaryRuth's eyes. She forwarded the email to Sarah with the caption, It's real. Someone said yes. Sarah texted back immediately. Of course they did. You're not selling a dress. You're selling the feeling. Later that week, Sarah invited her to a small gathering of local artisans at a shared studio downtown. It's not fancy, she said, but it's good people. MaryRuth hesitated. This world of confident creatives felt foreign, but when Sarah offered to pick her up and bring snacks, she caved. The studio was charming and eclectic. Mismatched chairs, colorful fabric bins, sewing machines humming like purring cats. One woman made hand-dyed baby wraps. Another crafted wooden toys with safe paint. They greeted MaryRuth like an old friend. Sarah introduced her proudly. This is MaryRuth. She makes heirloom dresses. She's about to launch something beautiful. MaryRuth flushed, but smiled. It felt good, like she was stepping into something real. During the break, an older woman with silver braids leaned over. I saw your pieces online. I hope you know your prices are still low for what you're offering. MaryRuth blinked. Seriously? The woman nodded. People will pay for love and craftsmanship. Let them. It felt like the universe was echoing Sarah's advice, this time with wrinkles and a gentle voice. On the way home, Sarah turned down the music and said, I'm proud of you. MaryRuth stared out the window. It's funny. I didn't realize how much shame I had around money, around being seen. And I think I'm ready to let that go. One stitch at a time. They rode the rest of the way in companionable silence, windows down, letting the warm Charleston air carry them home. Chapter 3. The Cost of Cheap. The second order came 2 days later, then another, 3 in 1 week. It wasn't a flood, but it was enough to jolt something inside MaryRuth, a hopeful hum, a flicker of maybe this could work that wouldn't quite go out. She started sewing during the day too, when the girls were at school. The kitchen table became her cutting table. Fabric was stacked in neat piles next to the cereal boxes. A chalk-marked pattern sat on top of a half-eaten bag of baby carrots. Her life was still stitched together by survival, but now it had color, texture, a beginning. Then came the DM. Hi, I'm obsessed with your dresses. I'd love to buy one, but $95 is steep. Could you do $50? MaryRuth stared at the screen. She felt her cheeks flush, her stomach tighten. The woman's tone wasn't rude exactly, just blunt, like she was haggling over a Facebook Marketplace couch. not something MaryRuth had poured herself into. She tapped out a polite, overly apologetic response. Thanks so much for the kind words. I totally understand if that price doesn't work for you. Each piece takes hours to make, and I use sustainable fabrics and fair labor practices, aka just me, late at night, with coffee and a seam ripper. Haha. The woman replied with a thumbs up. MaryRuth closed her phone, but her mood stayed crumpled, like muslin left in the dryer too long. Later that afternoon, Sarah showed up unannounced, holding 2 iced coffees and a bag of croissants from a bougie bakery that MaryRuth would never step foot in alone. You okay? Sarah asked, eyes narrowing like she already knew the answer. MaryRuth waved her phone. People keep asking for discounts. One even offered to shout me out on Instagram instead of paying full price. She has 300 followers. Sarah snorted. Was it her dog's account? MaryRuth laughed, but the ache lingered. I don't know, she said, biting into the croissant. It just feels gross asking for that much. I keep hearing my mom in my head. People like us don't buy those kinds of things. Sarah leaned back in her chair. Honey, people like us make those things. That's the difference. MaryRuth blinked. You weren't born to be a bargain bin, Sarah continued. You were born to create beauty. And if someone doesn't see the value, that's not your customer. MaryRuth wanted to believe that. She really did. But the truth was, it still felt wrong. Like she was trying to join a club she wasn't invited to. That weekend, she took the girls thrifting, a Saturday tradition. They browsed racks of denim and button-downs, finding a few treasures for school. MaryRuth picked up a once pricey linen blouse for herself, tagged $5. It still had a faint perfume scent from its former owner. Back at home, while washing the clothes, she noticed the stitching on the blouse. The seams were French finished, the buttons sewn with care, the fabric thick and soft. It had clearly once been expensive, and it had lasted. The next morning, while doom-scrolling during her lukewarm coffee, MaryRuth fell into a rabbit hole of fast fashion documentaries. One in particular hit hard, footage of children sorting through dyes and sweatshop workers paid pennies for 14-hour days. She sat there in silence as the credits rolled, her hands numb, tears gathering in the corners of her eyes. She thought of every $6 tee she'd impulse bought. Every child's dress that fell apart after 3 washes. Every time she'd prided herself on saving money, never stopping to wonder what the cost really was, or who had paid it. That night, when she picked up the girls from their dads, Lila said, Are you okay? You look sad, but like, brave, sad. MaryRuth hugged her tight. I'm okay, just thinking big thoughts. She looked at her girls, one with scuffed sneakers and wild curls, the other with grass-stained leggings and a glittery smile. And it hit her. If she wanted them to value their own work, their own worth, she had to model that first. Even if it felt uncomfortable, especially then. On Monday, she updated her website. She added a new tab, Why It Costs What It Costs. She wrote in plain, warm language about slow fashion, about ethical materials, about her process, cutting, sewing, steaming, packaging, about how her daughters often danced in the kitchen while she worked, about how she wasn't running a factory. She was building something with care for other mothers like her. Then, she added a photo of a magnolia dress draped over a wooden chair, sunlight spilling across it. The caption read, This dress was made while listening to my daughter sing Taylor Swift off-key. It was sewn with hands that once didn't believe they were good enough. I hope it makes your little one feel like magic. She hit publish before she could overthink it. That night, another order came in. Then 2 more. One had a message. Thank you for educating me. I never knew what went into this. I'm honored to support what you're doing. MaryRuth wept quietly on her porch, a fleece blanket wrapped around her shoulders, her sewing scissors beside her on the step. She wasn't just selling dresses anymore. She was helping women unlearn, including herself. Chapter 4. Hemmed In by Fear. MaryRuth's tiny home studio, formerly the laundry room, smelled like lavender starch and nervous sweat. She stood in the doorway one morning, just staring at the chaos. Bobbins rolling loose in a tin, a bolt of ivory muslin leaning like a drunken guest. Her spiral-bound notebook open to a half-doodled sketch of a new sundress she hadn't dared begin. The fear was back, gnawing at the edges again. Orders were steady now, a few per week, enough to make her believe this wasn't a fluke. And that, ironically, made it worse. Because what if she couldn't keep up? What if she messed up someone's order? What if she really raised her prices and people stopped coming altogether? It was easier, in a twisted way, to struggle, to undercharge and overdeliver. It kept expectations manageable and disappointment preemptive. But success? That required something scarier, receiving. She hadn't mastered that one yet. Later that day, while sitting on a park bench watching her girls run through a splash pad, her phone buzzed. Sarah. Emergency. I need to borrow your hands and your eyes. Studio in 30? MaryRuth smiled. Sarah always texted like she was a spy in a romantic comedy. She packed up the girls and swung by a smoothie shop on the way. At the studio, Sarah was knee-deep in mood boards for a local maker's market they'd applied to. She was designing their booth concept, crisp linen table runners, vintage crates, delicate clotheslines strung with dresses like bunting. I'm thinking Charleston Spring Fete meets Little Women? Sarah explained. With QR codes. MaryRuth laughed. Sounds like exactly my brand of chaos. Exactly. They got to work. The girls helped tape fabric samples to the walls and rearrange succulents. Sarah took a call and wandered outside, leaving MaryRuth alone for a moment in the sun-drenched studio. She wandered to the pegboard wall, where a simple quote hung. Let the work speak for itself. Your job is to listen and stay out of the way. Her throat tightened. She was the one in the way, not the prices, not the customers. Her. She touched one of her own magnolia dresses hanging on the rack, felt the weight of it, the structure. It looked legitimate, like it belonged in a boutique, like maybe she did too. When Sarah returned, MaryRuth cleared her throat. Hey, what if I added a $125 tier? For custom sizing or monograms? Sarah raised her eyebrows but didn't speak. MaryRuth continued, I don't know. Maybe even do a few dresses with embroidery, like real heirloom pieces. Sarah walked over slowly, arms crossed. And you'd charge what they're worth? MaryRuth nodded. I think I'm ready. A beat passed, then Sarah broke into a wide grin. Well, it's about time. They launched the heirloom collection the following week. Just 4 pieces, each with detailed embroidery inspired by local wildflowers. Jasmine, magnolia, wisteria, and Carolina jessamine. Each priced at $125. MaryRuth's finger trembled when she hit publish, the same way it had when she posted her very first dress. But this time, something had shifted. She wasn't apologizing for the price. She wasn't explaining it in the product description. She wasn't padding the listing with nervous, if that's okay, language. Instead, it simply said, handmade heirloom dress, meant to last through childhood and maybe the next one too. Then she logged off, took the girls for ice cream. She was halfway through a scoop of coconut almond fudge when her phone buzzed. 2 new orders, then another. By bedtime, all 4 heirloom dresses were sold out. She stared at her phone, speechless. Lila came into the room, toothbrush hanging from her mouth. "Mom, why are you smiling like that?" MaryRuth shook her head, tears in her eyes. "Because I finally believed in myself enough to ask for what I'm worth." Lila nodded sagely. "Cool. Can I borrow $20? MaryRuth laughed so hard she nearly dropped the phone. That night, while folding laundry and humming to herself, she found one of Emmy's old dresses at the bottom of the basket. One she'd made before she'd ever thought of selling. Cotton poplin, faded strawberries, neckline just slightly uneven. She held it in her hands for a long moment. It had cost her nothing but time and love. And now, she understood. That's exactly why it had been so valuable. She folded it neatly and placed it on the shelf with care, like a relic, a reminder. Chapter 5: Patterns of the Past. The text came from her sister out of nowhere. "Hey, Mom's going through boxes. She found some of your old sewing projects. Thought you might want them?" MaryRuth hesitated. Her childhood wasn't exactly scrapbook-worthy, but she replied anyway. "Sure. Tell her thanks." A week later, a cardboard box showed up on her porch, frayed at the corners, sealed with aggressive layers of packing tape. The handwriting on the label was unmistakably her mom's, sharp, all caps, and somehow judgy even through ink. She brought the box into her studio and set it beside her work table. The air smelled faintly of attic. The first thing she pulled out was a faded piece of muslin, stiff with time, an apron she'd made at age 10, back when her home ec teacher still called her Mary Beth, because the school form had never been corrected. Uneven stitches lined the hem like a drunk caterpillar. The pocket was lopsided, but she remembered being so proud of it. She'd worn it every Saturday while helping her mom make boxed pancakes and rewash Ziplocs to save a few cents. Underneath were scraps of fabric she barely remembered, an old flannel nightgown from a cousin, a blue gingham she'd tried to make into doll clothes. There was even a handmade birthday card from her younger self, signed in pink glitter pen. "One day, I'll have my own fashion store. Just watch." MaryRuth blinked hard. That afternoon, she drove to the edge of Charleston to see her mom. The girls were with their dad for the weekend, and she hadn't visited in months. Her mother's house still smelled like vinegar and floral dryer sheets. A handmade quilt covered the back of the same faded sofa. MaryRuth remembered watching The Price is Right from as a kid. "Thanks for the box," MaryRuth said as she stepped inside. Her mom waved her off. "Thought you'd toss it, honestly, but you always were sentimental." MaryRuth smiled tightly. "I guess I'm realizing how much those little projects mattered." Her mom made a non-committal noise. "You always were crafty, just not practical." There it was, that old, familiar sting. The implied judgment tucked in every compliment. The idea that creativity was a luxury they'd never had time or money for. "I'm starting a real business now," MaryRuth offered, testing the waters. "It's going pretty well." Her mother blinked. "Selling dresses?" MaryRuth nodded. "Handmade, slow fashion, ethical sourcing, small batch." Her mom pursed her lips. "And people buy that?" MaryRuth bit back the urge to defend herself. "Yes, because I price them for what they're worth." A beat passed. Her mother sighed, folding a dish towel. "I'm just saying, when I was raising you girls, I didn't have time to think about organic cotton or, what did you say, ethics. I needed clean shirts and shoes that didn't fall apart in the rain." "I know. I'm not criticizing, Mary Beth. I'm just practical." MaryRuth swallowed the irritation rising in her throat. But practical doesn't have to mean cheap, Mom. It can mean sustainable. It can mean investing in something that lasts. Her mother looked at her then, really looked at her, for the first time in the conversation. You sound different. MaryRuth shrugged. Maybe I am? On the drive home, her eyes kept returning to that old glitter card promise. One day, I'll have my own fashion store. That little girl had believed without shame or hesitation that her ideas were valuable, that her designs mattered, that her work was worthy. Where had that belief gone? Buried under years of pinched pennies and clearance racks, under the weight of being a good wife, a good mom, a good steward of every nickel. But she was starting to understand that being a good steward didn't mean avoiding money. It meant honoring it, circulating it with care, respecting what went into the things she bought and the things she made. That night, she pulled out her embroidery thread and began stitching a new sampler for her studio, a nod to the aprons and the sewing lessons and the girl who believed she could. It said, "Make things that last. Charge what they're worth. Start with yourself." The needle moved smoothly under her fingers, a pattern worth repeating.
Still with us? This is the kind of story we share every week. Hit subscribe to follow along.
Chapter 6, Threads That Bind. It was Sarah's idea to visit the mill. Well, not just a mill, she said, passing MaryRuth a flyer over their third iced latte of the week. It's this old-school organic cotton co-op out near the PD, family-run, local, the real deal. MaryRuth raised an eyebrow. And they'll talk to us? Sarah grinned. Already emailed the owner. They're thrilled someone local wants to build a slow fashion brand. You'd think you were Oprah, the way they responded. A week later, they were driving past fields of pale green cotton under a wide South Carolina sky. Sarah drove with one hand on the wheel and the other gesturing wildly while explaining the difference between long staple and short staple fibers. Longer fibers mean softer, stronger fabric, she said. Think more heirloom quilt, less scratchy fourth-grade play costume. MaryRuth smiled. I feel like I should be taking notes. Don't worry, I made you a folder. Of course she had. The mill was nestled between rows of crepe myrtles with a weathered sign that read, Hollings and Daughters Organic Cotton Cooperative. The building was part factory, part farmhouse, clean, warm, and humming with quiet industry. Inside, they met Linda Hollings, the third daughter in the lineage. Her hands were calloused, her smile wide. Y'all must be the Charleston girls. Come on in. We just finished ginning a new bale. MaryRuth followed, eyes wide. The place smelled faintly of cotton and sun-warmed wood. Machines whirred gently in the background, and bolts of pristine, undyed fabric lined the walls. Linda guided them through the process, how the cotton was grown without pesticides, how local women had been brought in and trained to spin and weave, how every inch of waste was repurposed. We like to say everything gets a second life, Linda explained. MaryRuth ran her fingers over a bolt of unbleached muslin. It was soft, luxuriously so, and carried a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in the big-box fabric store bolts she'd used in the past. Sarah leaned in. This would photograph beautifully. MaryRuth's eyes shimmered. It already feels like home. Over lemonade in the co-op's sunroom, Linda asked about their plans. MaryRuth hesitated. I want to make dresses that matter, not trendy stuff, pieces that get handed down, worn to birthday parties and church picnics and passed to baby cousins. Linda smiled. We call that wearing stories. MaryRuth's throat tightened. That's exactly it. You'd be surprised how many folks think that kind of thing doesn't matter anymore, Linda said, folding her hands. But people crave meaning. They're tired of plastic, tired of things that break. Sarah nodded. That's our entire pitch. Buy less, love longer. Linda stood. Well then, we'd be proud to partner with you. I'll have our lead seamstress connect with you. She runs a small team nearby. Honest pay, flexible hours, all local women. MaryRuth blinked. Wait, other seamstresses? Yes, ma'am. You're building a business, right? You'll need hands other than yours eventually. MaryRuth felt her stomach flutter. Scaling, letting go of control, paying others. She nodded slowly. Okay, I want to do this the right way. Linda extended her hand. Then welcome to the family. On the drive home, MaryRuth was quiet. Sarah didn't press. Finally, somewhere outside Monk's Corner, MaryRuth spoke. I used to think being cheap was the same as being smart. Sarah kept her eyes on the road. Most women were taught that, especially moms, especially daughters of moms who had nothing. I still have trouble spending $20 on myself, MaryRuth admitted, but I just shook hands on a $500 fabric order. That's growth, babe. Wild, soft, expensive growth. They laughed. Then MaryRuth added, I think for the first time, I'm not ashamed of wanting to make money. Real money. The kind that makes room for generosity, not just survival. Sarah glanced over. There she is. That night, back in her little studio, MaryRuth laid the new samples across her cutting table. She hadn't even sewn a stitch yet, but somehow the room felt different, brighter. Like something sacred had shifted. She picked up one of the muslin swatches and held it to her cheek. It was soft, yes, but it was also strong. The kind of strength that doesn't shout, but lasts, like her. Chapter 7. Alterations and Affirmations. The first time MaryRuth saw her new prototypes lined up in a row, she cried. Not delicate, glistening eye tears. Real, hiccuping sobs that left her blotchy and mascara smudged, right there on the floor of the studio. 4 dresses, all stitched from the Hollings co-op cotton, each with its own hand-embroidered wildflower motif. Sarah had photographed them in the courtyard of a local historic inn, lit by the soft morning sun and a little Charleston breeze that made the dresses look like they were mid-twirl. Emmy and Lila had modeled 2 of them, matching braids, barefoot, laughing through every shot. The girls had been shy at first, but then leaned into the moment like it was just another backyard game. It was a game, in some ways. A game MaryRuth had once only played in her mind, back when it had seemed too expensive to dream. Now it was real. I think this is the first time I feel like a business owner, she whispered, phone in hand, scrolling through the edited gallery. Not just a mom who sews. Sarah, perched on a stool nearby, raised her coffee. To owning it. They clinked mugs. Later that week, MaryRuth sat down at her kitchen table to write the new About page for her website. She'd been putting it off, partly out of insecurity, partly because describing herself in a way that didn't feel fake or awkward was harder than writing product descriptions. But Sarah had been firm. People don't just buy the dress, they buy you. They want the story. She stared at the blinking cursor for a long time. Then, slowly, the words came. I'm MaryRuth. I'm a mom of 2 girls, a self-taught seamstress, and a believer in making things that last. I started sewing to save money. Now I sew to honor it. My dresses are slow-made with locally grown organic cotton and stitched with care right here in South Carolina. These pieces are made to be worn hard and loved harder. They're for birthday parties, tea parties, and every normal Tuesday in between. This isn't fast fashion. This is legacy. She hit save and exhaled. Something in her posture changed after that. Her shoulders didn't carry as much invisible weight. Her voice, when answering DMS, got steadier. She no longer hedged, when someone asked why a toddler dress cost over $100. Instead, she said, "Because it's worth it." And she believed it. That weekend, Sarah came over with a whiteboard and too much energy. "Okay, listen. I know you hate planning, but we need to talk launch strategy." MaryRuth groaned playfully. "Do we have to?" "Yes, because guess what? Anthropologie called." MaryRuth blinked. "Like, the Anthropologie?" Sarah grinned. "They saw the Instagram photos. They want to include your line in a local makers campaign. Small order to start, but still, this is big." MaryRuth stared at her, mouth open. "Are you punking me?" "No, but if I was, this would be a great setup." They high-fived like middle schoolers. Then panic set in. "But what if I can't keep up?" MaryRuth asked. "What if I ruin this?" Sarah leaned in. "Then we course correct. You're not alone in this. We have local seamstresses now, systems, support. This is what scaling ethically looks like. And don't forget, you're the boss." MaryRuth laughed. "That feels weird." Sarah pointed at her chest. "Get used to it, CEO." Later that night, while organizing fabric swatches, MaryRuth paused to watch Emmy at the table, coloring with a worn set of pastels. "What are you drawing, Bug?" Emmy held up the paper. It was a picture of MaryRuth standing in front of a boutique, a dress on a mannequin in the window. "That's you," she said proudly. "I'm gonna wear your dresses when I'm a grown-up too." MaryRuth felt something in her chest break open and pour light. She bent down, brushed a curl from Emmy's forehead, and whispered, "You can wear anything you want, and make anything you want." Emmy beamed. "Even space clothes?" "Especially space clothes." Before bed, MaryRuth opened her notebook and jotted one line at the top of a blank page. "Legacy starts with permission." Then she turned out the light, knowing, for once, she was no longer trying to earn her place at the table. She was sewing it from scratch. Chapter 8. Buttoned Up or Bowing Out. The email subject line read, "Local Artisan Launch Opportunity, Whole Foods Market, Charleston." MaryRuth blinked twice before opening it. Her breath caught when she read the body. They wanted her. Her line. Her story. In 3 weeks. "I'm gonna throw up," she told Sarah over the phone. Sarah whooped. "You did it." "I mean, we did it," MaryRuth corrected, pacing in front of her studio window. "But I have to ask, are you sure about all of this? You're practically running my business. I feel like I owe you, like, a car." There was silence on the line. Then Sarah sighed. "Okay, let's talk about the money thing." MaryRuth froze. "Oh God, I didn't mean—" Sarah cut her off. "I know you didn't, but you're carrying this guilt around like a tote bag full of bricks, and I'm telling you to put it down." MaryRuth sat on the arm of the couch, heart thudding. Sarah's voice softened. "Let's just say the court was very in my favor. My ex was a hedge fund guy who thought prenups were unromantic, and I was smart enough to keep receipts, financial and emotional. I'm more than fine." MaryRuth blinked. "So, this is just charity?" Sarah laughed. "No, this is joy. Look, I tried the charity route, donated to 10 nonprofits, funded a dog park, even joined a board once. You know what made me feel alive? Watching you. Watching a woman with vision, grit, and taste pull herself out of the wreckage and build." MaryRuth bit her lip. "But aren't you bored? I mean, don't you miss your design studio?" "Oh, honey, no. You know what I'd be doing if I weren't helping you?" Sarah paused for dramatic effect. "Playing pickleball with women named Janice who complain about their tennis elbow and grandkids who don't call." MaryRuth snorted. I love helping you because you remind me of the girl I used to be. Scrappy, smart, kind, a little over-caffeinated. And now, I get to help without worrying about the rent. That's a privilege, not a problem. But still, someday I want to pay you, MaryRuth said quietly. For real, like profit share or commissions or something? Sarah's voice warmed. Then we'll figure it out, one stitch at a time. They went into overdrive, preparing for the Whole Foods showcase. MaryRuth worked 10-hour days in her studio while Sarah coordinated logistics, product tags, signage, even branded tote bags with the phrase "heirloom not hype" printed in soft gray. The girls helped too. Emmy tied bows onto hangers. Lila learned to steam dresses like a pro. The house was a mess, the fridge a graveyard of takeout containers, but the energy? Electric. 3 days before the event, MaryRuth stood in front of the mirror holding her new business cards. They were simple, clean, matte blush with embossed gold lettering. Thread by thread, MaryRuth Harper, founder. She didn't cry. She just smiled. For once, there was nothing to prove, just something to show. On launch day, the Whole Foods table looked like something out of a curated lifestyle magazine. Gauzy linen, potted herbs, a little brass sign with their story printed in serif font. And in the center, 6 hand-sewn dresses, each folded or hung like precious artwork. MaryRuth stood behind the table in a vintage floral dress she'd made just for the event, soft and confident. A woman in a linen jumpsuit walked by, stopped, and picked up the jasmine-embroidered piece. "Oh, wow! This is exquisite! Did you really make these?" MaryRuth nodded. "Yes, and we grow the cotton locally too." The woman turned the price tag over. "Honestly, I'd have expected this to cost more." MaryRuth blinked. "Thank you." Not once did anyone ask why a children's dress cost $125. Not once did someone raise an eyebrow or say, "That's steep." Instead, people smiled, nodded, bought. 4 dresses sold within the first 2 hours. By the end of the day, only one remained. MaryRuth wrapped it carefully in tissue and set it aside. "For Emmy's birthday," she whispered. "She deserves one too." Later that night, Sarah and MaryRuth sat in lawn chairs on the back porch, sipping sparkling water and letting their adrenaline come down like a soft rain. MaryRuth turned to her. "Do you know what this feels like?" Sarah raised a brow. "Do tell." "Like I'm finally using the good fabric, not just saving it for a future that may never come." Sarah smiled wide. "Amen to that." Inside, MaryRuth picked up a blank tag and wrote something on the back. She pinned it to the sample dress still on display in her studio. "Not for sale. The first one that made me believe I was allowed to charge what it's worth." Chapter 9. The Launch and the Let Go. The Anthropologie call came on a Wednesday. MaryRuth was elbow-deep in a bin of mismatched buttons when her phone buzzed. She almost didn't answer. Her hands were sticky with beeswax polish, but something told her to pick up. "Hi, this is Bethany from Anthropologie's regional merchandising team. We'd love to talk about a limited collection collaboration. We're big fans of your story, and your embroidery work is breathtaking." MaryRuth blinked so hard her eyes hurt. Yes, absolutely. Yes, please." When she hung up, she just stood there for a full minute in silence. Then she screamed so loud that Lila, who was upstairs finishing homework, shouted down, "Did a raccoon get in the kitchen again?" MaryRuth laughed, wiped her hands on her apron, and walked out to the porch, where Sarah was pruning one of the herb pots she'd brought over months ago as a symbol of growing something real. "They want a collection," MaryRuth whispered. Sarah grinned. "Of course they do. We've been planting seeds. Now we harvest." The next 2 weeks were a blur. Not the old kind of blur, stressful, reactionary, full of scarcity and skipping meals, but a new blur, purposeful, brimming, creatively chaotic. MaryRuth brought on 2 of the seamstresses from the Hollings co-op part-time, paid them fair wages, let go of the idea that she had to sew every piece herself to make it count. She delegated for the first time in her life, and it felt like exhaling. One night, after approving final samples for Anthropologie, she and Sarah sat on the studio floor, surrounded by packaging supplies and printed fabric labels. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop," MaryRuth confessed. "Like someone's going to tap me on the shoulder and say, 'Just kidding, back to bargain racks with you.'" Sarah looked at her for a long moment. "You've been walking barefoot for years, honey. There's no shoe left to drop." MaryRuth swallowed hard. "I used to think being small was the safest way to stay liked, stay loved." Sarah nodded. "And now?" "Now I think being small was just another way of apologizing for existing." The truth of it lingered in the quiet room. Then Sarah said, "Look how much space you're taking up now." MaryRuth looked around, at the racks, the framed quote on the wall, the calendar full of deadlines, and the shelves full of tools she finally allowed herself to buy new. She whispered, "It feels good." On the night of the Anthropologie launch, MaryRuth took the girls out to dinner at a restaurant with cloth napkins and no kid menu. They wore dresses she'd made just for the occasion. Lavender for Emmy, sky blue for Leela, both with tiny embroidered hearts on the cuffs. When the waiter asked if they were celebrating something, Lila beamed. "Our mom's dresses are in a real store." MaryRuth laughed. "I guess they are." After dinner, they walked by the window of the boutique, just to see. There, under soft gold lighting, hung 5 dresses, each tagged thread by thread, handmade in Charleston. Her handwriting on the labels, her story on the display card. MaryRuth's throat tightened. Emmy reached up and squeezed her hand. "You did it, Mommy," she said. MaryRuth blinked back tears. "We did it." Back home, after tucking the girls in, she sat in her studio. Just sat. No to-do list. No multitasking. She looked at the empty hanger where the first magnolia sample had once hung, where she had pinned the tag. "Not for sale." She pulled it down. Then she walked to her closet and placed the dress gently beside her best blouse. No more relics. No more saving things for someday. Just her. Living in the middle of the thing she built. And for the first time in a long time, she let go of what she'd clung to the most. The need to explain herself. Chapter 10. Worth every thread. The sun was barely up when MaryRuth slipped into the kitchen. The house was quiet, the girls still dreaming. A vase of wildflowers from Emmy sat on the table, drooping slightly in the morning heat. She poured her coffee slowly. No rush, no panic in her chest. Just stillness. Outside the window, the early light fell across her backyard, where the clothesline held 3 new dresses, freshly washed prototypes for the spring line. They fluttered in the breeze like flags of a country she'd finally claimed. Her studio, once a cramped laundry room, now stretched across the back third of the house. Sarah had talked her into the renovation. "Why not? You're running a real brand now," and even helped design it. The walls were whitewashed, the work tables built by a local carpenter, the pegboards hung with brass hooks and love. There was a new shelf, too, hand-stained walnut, lined with tiny keepsakes, the original Magnolia tag, a snapshot of the girls at the Whole Foods booth, a sticky note from Lila that said CEOMOM in bubble letters. It was in this quiet, sacred space that MaryRuth opened her laptop and began typing the newsletter to her growing subscriber list. The subject line read, The cost of cheap and why we're done with it. She wrote about her journey, not in a polished, brand marketing way, but in the way you'd talk to a friend over tea. About the early days of hand sewing at the kitchen table, about the guilt of charging what felt like too much, about the shame she didn't even know she'd inherited from generations of women who made everything stretch, but never gave themselves room to grow. She ended it with, "We believe in making things that matter, in charging what they're worth, in helping women unlearn the lie that value is selfish. Cheap things are cheap. What we make here, it's heirloom, and that means something." She hit send, sat back, and let the moment land. Later that afternoon, Sarah came by with iced tea and a stack of packaging samples. They sat on the porch while the girls played hopscotch on the sidewalk. "I was thinking," MaryRuth said, "maybe next year we create a capsule collection for moms too. Dresses with pockets, lined bodices, comfort and glory." Sarah raised her glass. "To glory pockets." They clinked again. Then MaryRuth added, "I also want to host a workshop. Teach women to sew, not just for fun, but to remember what their hands can do." Sarah smiled. "Now you're talking legacy." That night, Emmy and Lila helped tag a few final dresses for the Anthropologie restock. MaryRuth let them pick the thread colors for the final monogram. They chose pink and gold. Before bed, Lila asked, "Mom, do you ever miss your old life?" MaryRuth thought about it, about how small her dreams had once felt, how she'd traded so much joy for frugality, how she'd convinced herself her worth was tied to how little she asked for. "No," she said softly. "I don't miss it. I'm proud of it. But I like this one better." Lila nodded, satisfied. "It's more you." The next morning, MaryRuth stepped into her studio, breathed in the scent of cotton, steam, and something deeper. Possibility. On the wall, above her cutting table, she pinned a new phrase on linen. "Charge what it's worth. Live like you believe it. Sew magic into every seam." And then she picked up her scissors, because there was more beauty to make, thread by thread. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear why. Drop a comment below and share what spoke to you. If you haven't already, be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support means more than you know, and it helps us keep sharing stories that matter.